My name's Jamie Schena. I guess I'm described as a industrial artist. I focus on hand building metal sculptures. I use recycled metals, automotive components to construct and hand build metal sculptures, generally automotive inspired. A lot of what I do is motorbikes, cars, trucks, tractors. Generally what my clientele or what I'm interested in building. I come from a racing background, so race cars and fast cars are generally my go-to or what I'm interested in personally. But I do love the mechanical aspect of motorbikes, so they always intrigue me. And it's something I'll never own, so I guess building a motorbike is one way of owning. Yes, I'm from Australia. I grew up in country Victoria, which is about 2 hours out of Melbourne, a little place called Trafalgar. It's located in Gippsland, which is like rural country area. I grew up in a very, very small town. I actually grew outside of Trafalgar, about 7 minutes out of the town on 2 acres. So we're surrounded by a farm area. My dad's a mechanic, and he also designs and builds farm machinery outside of, in this country town, so country area. So yeah, I grew up there, and I guess I lived with my parents there until I was 18, and then I moved out of home and went to Melbourne, big city, to study industrial design, to become a car designer. And then from there, more or less, after I'd finished graduating, I worked for GM in Australia, which is kind of like a dream job. But then from there, I moved over to the US, and I've been here since. But I'm from Australia, and I do go home regularly because that is my home. But
sure,
I'm over here for the adventure, get out and see the world, pretty much.
It's funny because Americans are like, I want to go to Australia for the adventure. And you're an Australian going, I want to go to America for the adventure.
I was never supposed to be here. I was actually only traveling here. It's just coincidence that I ended up living in the US.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So tell me about this. You traveled to the US and what happened? How did it happen?
So what happened is I actually had a job lined up in Germany, in Munich. Mm-hmm. So after working for 3.5 years at this design studio, Holden, which is the Australian version of GM.
Right. Which gave us all the good GM vehicles, or at least the start of the good GM vehicles.
Right. Yeah, so I was working for them, and I really loved my job, but I sort of got to a point where I was getting too comfortable. You know, I was still doing my artwork on the side as well as working and other hobbies, such as I used to race go-karts, which is actually how my artwork got started. But yeah, I was doing that on weekends, and I was kind of living this comfortable life, but I just didn't see myself progressing at the rate that I wanted to.
Okay.
So, I mean, I worked with a really good bunch of blokes who had travelled the world and are very experienced in their craft. And they said, look, the only way you're going to progress at the rate is you need to travel and see how it's done in other car studios and other places around the world and get inspired by that, because generally your experiences and whatnot will reflect in your work and you'll learn just about life.
Sure.
You'll become a lot more mature and professional person just by experiencing different parts, different cultures and whatnot. So I took their advice and I quit my job, which I'd worked all those years to get. And I was actually had a job lined up in Germany, but I wasn't starting for another 3 months. So I wanted to use that time to travel because I hadn't been outside of Australia. And one of my good mates who I studied with for 5 years, he's living in Detroit at the time, working for GM. He got a job over there. And so I decided to meet up with him in Vegas, and we went on a road trip for 3 weeks. And after that road trip of just seeing parts of the US, I went back to Detroit with him, and I was just hanging out there. And a couple of the managers who I'd met who were Australian, and they actually got me my job back in Australia when I was fresh out of uni. Mm-hmm. Wanted to catch up for drinks and just see what I was up to and whatnot. And they weren't too happy when I told them I quit a job they helped me get. But yeah, it was funny that they asked me what I was doing. I said, just over here traveling. I'm going to go to Germany, go work over there. And they're like, oh, yeah, cool. And then they said, you're going to be in LA at any time? And I was like, maybe. I said, I got to go back to Australia at some point, and then that's LA's the stop along the way. So yeah, I'll probably be there. And they're like, oh, you should catch up with Rob. one of the managers at the studio I'm at for drinks and whatnot when you're there. And I'm like, oh, yeah, will do. And they said, I'm actually talking to him tomorrow on the phone. I'll let him know you're here and exchange details. I'm like, oh, cool. So he rang me and asked me what I was up to. And I said, oh, look, just traveling around. And, he asked if I'm going to be in LA. And I said, oh, maybe. We'll see. But I got his details and whatnot. And 2 days later, he rang me back and he said, oh, Jamie, you're not going to believe this, but a job just opened up at our studio, which would be perfect for you. Do you want to come for an unofficial interview? And it'd just be a good chance to meet the managers there, and who knows what might come on. I know you already got a job lined up, but what might come of it later on? I said, yeah, okay. He goes, oh, can you fly to LA in 2 days? I said, yeah, okay. So I flew there, and supposed to only be a 20-minute just meeting, and he was going to show me around the studio and whatnot. And I've been there talking with them for about 3 hours or so, and they had other guys they interviewed, but it was just for me to grasp the studio and meet them. And after 3 hours of talking with them and showing my folio and what I'm about, the next day they rang back and said, look, you're the most inexperienced guy we've interviewed, but we want you on our team. If you're interested, job's yours. And I'm like, oh, crazy. So I rang up the contracting agency in Germany that I was going through, and I told them what had happened, and I said, look, I wasn't looking for a job. The job found me. And they said, no. By all means, take it and give it a go, because it's very difficult for foreigners to get work in the US unless you've got a job lined up. So that job sort of found me, and they said, look, give it a go. If you don't like it, this job's always here for you. So 4 years later, I'm still here. But the biggest contributor of me still being here is my artwork. Yeah, I flew back home, packed up my stuff and moved to the US. And then California or the US is such a big economy compared to Australia, so there's just a lot more opportunities for me to freelance and pursue my hobby, my artwork, which is like a sideline business I have. So that was the main reason why I'm still here, and it's how I ended up in the US anyway, is through my actual job as an industrial designer, a clay sculptor. Which is what you're still currently doing as a full-time? Yeah, I just come from work.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I do for my full-time work is I work on the design team at General Motors, the advanced studio in North Hollywood.
Seeing a theme here, you can't get away from GM.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a coincidence I kept working for them. I have to quit in for them.
Yeah, it's funny how it goes. You went from them back to them.
Yeah, right. I work on the design team there as a clay sculptor. So I like working with my hands, so that job sort of just comes easy to me. So I sculpt with clay during the day, and at night time I sculpt with metal. I find the clay sculpting really helps with my metalwork because they kind of work hand in hand. Like they're both referencing images and then trying to create not only proportions and then trying to capture a theme or whatever it is I'm building, but it's really trying to capture the drama or the capturing the character of that car, of what it is we're designing or building. So they work hand in hand. But yeah, during the day I'm a clay sculptor, an automotive designer for GM, and then at night time and on weekends I pursue my hobby, which is full-time work as well. Which is building metal sculptures from recycled automotive components and recycled metals, which I find and then give them new purpose and create them into art pieces.
My question for you is, there's so many different tiers of car design. There's so many different steps that you have to take to design a car. Talk to me about this design brief. You can give us kind of an idea as to the whole process without making this entirely about the whole process of car design.
Yeah, essentially, same as any design project, it starts with a problem and we try and design a solution. Mm-hmm. So the Holden studio was more along the lines of a production studio. We did advanced work, but I guess for me it was when you work on production vehicles, it gets tedious. The fun stuff is at the start, but then it gets very dry very fast, and you can't really like when I was designing through university or doing my own stuff, it's like, or even with my artwork, it gets, when you got that creative freedom, you can really just do what you want to do. Versus when you're in a production studio, we need to make a car that engineering are just telling us what we have to do.
Okay.
And we're just puppets on the string.
Got it.
Doing what we're told to do. And I guess that, I mean, that's a small factor, but I guess hearing all these stories and being a big fan of other automotive brands, I wanted to just go out and experience. And my ultimate goal was to go work on Lamborghinis or Ferraris, something.
Every kid's goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a job I had lined up, and I've still got that there one day, I guess, when the time comes. But I wanted to go out and travel. I'd never been outside of Australia at that point in time, and I knew that if I didn't leave where I was, I didn't have any commitments really. So I just wanted to. It wasn't that I hated my job or got bored of it or what the work was. It was all exciting stuff, and I really did enjoy it. But I was at a point where I just needed to step outside my comfort zone and just give something a go that I hadn't done before. Because there was always that thing in the back of my mind, if I don't go out and do this right now, am I going to regret it later?
Yeah.
Because if I end up having kids or settling down in Australia, then probably I wouldn't have taken that step and just packed up everything and just left.
Sure. Yeah, it's a lot harder to do that when you have other lives that are going to be affected as a result of what you want.
That's right. But I mean, I had a really good relationship with my manager, and I mean, he understood where I was at, and most of the guys I work with at my age had left the company or left to travel around and experience the big world. So for me, it was, I left on good terms and he was happy with my work ethic and what I brought to the table. So he goes, look, go out and have a go. And if you don't like it, you always got your job to come back to. So for me, it was just, I've always had things to fall back on. I've never been that uncertainty of not having a job. So this has to work. I've always had something to fall back on. So I guess with that safety net there, it's like, why not give something a go? Sure. Why not get out and step outside your comfort zone and do something different you haven't done before? And for me, that was traveling. I've never been outside the Australia, so I just wanted to start traveling and seeing the rest of the world, I guess. And if my work could take me there, well, why not? Yeah. It's a working holiday, essentially. Yeah. But yeah, I guess this opportunity come to work in the US, so I took that up. And what's kept me here, other than packing up and moving to Europe or somewhere else, is my artwork.
When it comes to actually doing what I called you in here for,
yeah.
Quite frankly, I didn't think it was your hobby. I was under the impression that this was your full-time gig, because it seems like you're always pumping out a new sculpture. Where this came from, I mean, I can kind of see a pattern, because you were clearly, you come from the design world, you raced go-karts, you love cars, you're a car guy, and now you're building these sculptures. I'm sure it wasn't like that. Where is the start, basically? Let's start with that.
I grew up in a very small country town, or outside of a small country town in a farming area, and my dad ran his own business from home. Okay. He was a diesel mechanic by trade, and he also went into the engineering field. So where we were, he was kind of like a jack of all trades. He would design and build farm machinery, one-off farm machines for the potato growing industry. So whether it was grading, sorting, picking potatoes, like he would have his hand in that, and he had a lot of experience in that. So he would build machines to help that process, whether it was digging them out of the ground, whether it was washing them or packaging them for supermarket use or whatever. Farmers would come to him with a design problem, I guess, and he would design a machine to do that job, to fix their problems. That was, I guess, the 50% of his business, and the other 50% was repairing trucks and tractors and restoring them or fixing them up for farmers. So my brother and I've got a younger sister, but my brother and I, from a young age, were more or less forced to help out in the family business.
Sure.
So at age 5, I was up there sweeping floors, cleaning his tools, helping out where I could. And as it went on, I would get given more responsibilities.
Okay.
So at age 8, I was taught how to weld, cut his steels.
At age 8.
So he would either give me a tractor to pull apart, so he'd tell me all the bolts and things to take apart. So I'd do that. I mean, I wouldn't know what I was doing, but I'd be pulling things apart, pulling gearboxes apart. And then when that job was done, or when he didn't have that much work on, or wherever he would take over, he would get me cutting steel and tacking up frames for certain machines that he was making, designing. So my job was to cut the steel to certain lengths and tack up frames, or if there was drive shafts, I'd cut the little keyway slots in for chain drives and things like that. So I was learning fabrication as well as becoming a mechanic. My older brother, that was his interest, and he'd work alongside Dad, so I was kind of forced into it.
Mm-hmm.
But so after school hours, Dad would come down and see what we're doing. If we had no homework to do, well, up working for him.
Time to cut some steel.
Yeah, right.
Man, at age 8, I barely knew how to tie my own shoes, and you're walking around with a welder.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it at the time. I hated working for him, just because it was something I was forced to do as opposed to wanting to do.
Sure.
But I guess it's an incentive for us. So my dad, when he was a younger age, he used to, there's a local go-kart track not far from us, and he used to watch people race go-karts, and that was something he always wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So when we become of age, and I guess my dad's pretty much a big kid. He wanted to go race go-karts and do something with us. So he wasn't really into football or soccer like most kids were in Australia. So he got us into go-karting. Well, he gave us a choice. We had an off-road go-kart at home, which we'd built ourselves. It was literally just a box tube frame with a 6.5 horsepower Honda motor.
That'll get you moving. 6.5 horsepower?
Yeah. Wheelbarrow wheels, no brakes.
Okay.
No protection, no roll frame or nothing. It was just literally a piece of wood to sit on.
Okay.
But that's what we learned to race on in our backyard, and you could see that we got enjoyment out of that. So he's like, well, he started racing. He went and bought himself a proper go-kart.
Okay.
And started doing
like
that.
A shifter cart type of thing?
No, so the tracks in Australia, there's limited. There's the more smaller go-kart tracks, so they don't suit the shifter carts. They're more of a fixed drive. They're the same chassis, same engines, but just a fixed drive. They're not a shifter cart because the straights aren't long enough to really get out of second gear and those type of go-karts.
Got it.
So they're more of a fixed drive thing. So he started racing go-karts, and then he asked if we wanted to do it, and of course we were petrol heads and loved what we did. Around home, just building go-karts or rallying around on those. So he goes, let's take it to the next step. So we all got a go-kart each, and as a family we started racing on weekends. But my dad ran his own business, so if his work didn't get done or he wasn't getting enough done, we couldn't go racing. So the incentive for us was to help him work during the week, help him out where we could, and he would take us racing on weekend as a reward. At age 8, he would give me as much as I could handle as an 8-year-old, welding and cutting steel wherever I could help, or sweeping or prepping machines, washing them down ready for paint, or taking apart tractors or trucks. And then he would take us racing on weekend. But it was all up to us. He gave us this responsibility for preparing our own go-kart, getting it ready to race.
I see what he did. Okay.
Pulling them apart, fixing them wherever we needed to fix them. And we were doing it on a budget. And it was more for a fun thing at the start, but we kind of had a natural knack for it, and we were always racing or riding things as young kids. So when we got power behind us, we used it to our full. We knew how to control it because we were used to drifting on grass. Okay. With wheelbarrow wheels and whatnot. And it didn't take long for us to start doing very well on a competitive level, winning races and whatnot. So
Okay.
he's like, all right, I can see them getting the hang of this and a thirst for more. So we started traveling around different parts of Australia racing, but same deal. We had to get our homework done. We had to get Dad's work done for us to go racing. So, every night after school, if we weren't working for him, we were fixing our go-karts, getting them ready for the next race meeting.
Right.
I guess I learnt a lot of skills which I use today from a young age, working with my dad, a lot of hands-on skills, and then being mechanically minded of how things work and pulling them apart and what's inside an engine and type thing. I learnt that through working with him, and also the racing side of it. But I come from a very creative family, so my dad is creative in terms of he builds machinery from nothing. He just thinks it up in his head how to fix a problem and he'll build it. But my mum's also, she come from she's a very good drawer, and through high school she actually studied clay sculpture, so she actually was a clay sculptor.
Okay, it's all coming together now.
And then when she left school, she would do wedding cakes and make cakes, whether it was birthdays or wedding cakes with a little lacing and that. She would hand pipe all that stuff on and whatnot. So, but my parents are both very creative people, and even my grandparents, like my grandmother, she was a seamstress. She would make clothes, design clothes. I come from a creative background, and I guess one thing led to another. In terms of my artwork, how that all took off, was another thing I probably didn't say was I used to collect model cars. What kid didn't?
Yeah.
But my parents stopped buying them for me, and they said, look, the money you earn, you can buy your own stuff. Or Dad said, or better still, why don't you just make your own, because you know how to make things.
Okay.
So I did. I would walk around to his scrap bins and find whatever scrap metal or parts that he was throwing out, and I'd start constructing things out of them just as a hobby and something to do. Not that I really had spare time back then, but when I'd finished his job and he wasn't around because he was out on call fixing tractors on site, while I would tinker around in the workshop making my own things. Age 12, I guess, is where I got my first sculpture commission.
Okay.
So how that all come about was through go-karting. I had my own personal sponsor at age 12.
For the racing?
For the go-karting, yeah. Mm-hmm. So he was part of the go-kart community, and he saw me come up from a young age and saw sort of like the talent that I had, and he wanted to support me the best I could to try and push me as far as I could, and helping me, I guess, with new tyres and engine repairs and whatnot. He would try and contribute as much as that, and even my entry fees for me to go race at other events, to go represent the go-kart club I was a part of.
Very cool.
He'd want me to do that. And at the end of the race season, I wanted to thank him, but what's a 12-year-old kid give someone with a lot of money? So I ended up collecting all the parts that I'd used throughout the race season. So my bottom end bearings, the go-kart chain, which had worn, little various nuts and bolts. So I actually built him a go-kart, a replica of my go-kart out of all the scrap parts that I used throughout the season to give to him as a thank you gift. So I put his company logo on the side, and in the seat I put a little thank you message to him, and I gave it to him as, I'd built it. But I mean, I didn't have a real lot of money, but I guess I wanted to do something for him that money couldn't buy.
Yeah.
So I gave it to him at the end of the season, and he loved it, and he was pretty blown away by it because he could see how much time and effort I'd put into it. But he was a big part of the go-karting community as an official, and he used to race himself. So he took this go-kart I'd built him around to all the events and was showing people, like, he was pretty proud of it. And I guess from there, people saw what I was doing or saw what I'd built, and they're like, oh, where do I get that from? And or how can I get one, or give to my sponsor, or one for my son for his birthday? Or
it's like a trophy now.
That's right. So I started building these little go-karts for people, and I guess another guy come along and said, oh, look, I don't want a go-kart built, I want an excavator built. If I give you photos, can you build it? I'm like, I'll give it a go. I don't know what it's going to look like, but sure.
Yeah.
So I'd go home, and anytime someone would come to me with a photo or something they wanted built, and they'd give me a photo of it, I just look at the image and I built it. I mean, they weren't nowhere near as detailed and as intricate and sculptural as they are now. They were a lot more of an industrial interpretation because I was using a lot of recycled chains and bearings and bolts and whatnot. So I was using a lot of that to produce these sculptures from a young age. And I mean, I wasn't selling them for a lot, but it was just helping contribute to my racing. So the money I was making from that, I could put back into my racing or other things that I wanted to do. Everything's pretty much been word of mouth, where someone's shown someone else my work and they've told someone else and they've contacted me and got me to build something. And I used to also enter local art competitions. So the different shires or areas or counties which I grew up in would host art fairs, so that we didn't have themes or different sections, so whether it was drawing or sculpture. And so my mum used to enter my artwork into these local fairs, and then from there I'd get more commissions or sell pieces. And then when I moved to Melbourne to study, because the racing side of it didn't really go as planned.
Okay.
I mean, my childhood dream, and I guess even to date, was to be a Formula One driver.
Yeah. I can relate to that dream.
Yeah. Is to race cars or race professionally. That was my ultimate goal. But I did race go-karts for 15 years on a professional level, and
it's a long time.
I guess got to the point where I had to realize, my dad was supporting me best he could, but he couldn't take me to the next level because I had my brother, my sister, and him that were racing as well. So how do you give up?
Yeah, it's a lot to sacrifice.
Right, for me to go on to the next level. And my brother was a good driver too, so why am I the chosen one? Like, why can't he go to the next level? But it was a lot of money, and Dad said, if you want to pursue that dream, I'll support you where I can, but that's something you have to go and do. So he just said, I'd rather you have something to fall back on if that doesn't work out, because you hear about the ones that make it, but you don't hear about the drivers that don't make it. And I did know friends that had went down that path and it didn't work out, and they did blow through a lot of money, and they put all their chips in one basket and it didn't work out for them, but then they went back to doing a job which they weren't really happy with. And my dad, one good bit of advice my dad did give me at a young age, he said, it doesn't matter what you do in life as long as you're happy doing it, because you're the one that's got to wake up every day and do that.
Yeah.
So if you find something you enjoy and you're passionate about, you'll do it well and you'll succeed in it. But if you don't enjoy what you do, you're not going to succeed and you won't enjoy doing it and you won't be happy in life. So I guess it was good advice. So the next best thing to racing go-karts is I had a very creative skill set or background, and I liked building things and designing things. So that was the next best thing, is I loved cars. So why not go design, and found out that was a job.
Yeah.
I used to draw and do sculptures and whatnot, and my dad used to call me a bullshit artist.
Okay, why's that?
Well, because I said, I'm going to make a living out of this. And he's like, no worries. So, because I was only at the time selling for not much. I was really covering my hours involved, and I wasn't factoring in all the equipment and the materials, like the welding side of it.
Yeah, you were a kid. You weren't focused on ROI. You were focused on doing what you really liked doing.
That's right. So
and getting them out there.
My dad did start charging me rent to use his workshop, and then that just to really test me to see.
Okay, the dedication.
Right, and anyway, I decided to pursue car design and go down that path, as well as still keep building sculptures and doing my art side of it, because I was getting regular commissions just through word of mouth. But when I moved to Melbourne, I just decided to start doing other art fairs and showcasing my work in different areas where I hadn't really shown it before, just to broaden my clientele. And just, I guess, I always enjoyed the challenge of someone coming to me with something new that I hadn't built. not necessarily whether I liked it or not. It was just a challenge. They come to me and said, "Oh, can you build this?" And I guess I never saw a limit to what I could do. It was just time.
Interesting. Okay.
You're only limited by your imagination, I guess. If you
have an imagination, a lot of people don't.
My dad actually, that was another interesting saying, and he was pretty passionate about this because he used to hate us kids saying, "I can't do this, I can't do that." He said, "There's no such thing as you can't." And I guess the saying, which he had his own version of it, but I guess the saying, the famous quote comes from Henry Ford. If you think you can, you can.
Yeah.
If you think you can't, you're right. So yeah, it was in a roundabout way. My dad just focused on there's no such thing as you can't. If you really want something in life, if you want to do something, you can do it. There's a means and ways of doing it.
Right.
And for me, I guess when people come to me with an image, they're like, "Oh, can you build this?" I kind of always had that. I need to prove to them or to myself that I can do it.
Yeah.
And obviously the money side of it was an incentive as well. Obviously I'm getting paid to build something or do something I enjoy doing. So that was a little factor in it, but it was more so the challenge I enjoyed. But where my artwork took its next step was I was displaying my artwork in a well-off area in country just outside the city, where a lot of people had holiday houses and whatnot. And this scout for art galleries was walking through and he saw my stuff and it wasn't something that they had in their gallery. So he took photos of it and took it back to the gallery to show the gallery owner my work. And that afternoon I get a phone call on the way home from displaying my work at this art fair on a weekend. And this guy goes, "Oh, look, a friend of mine was at this fair, saw your work. I haven't seen it in person, but he's describing it and it's kind of the thing which it's something I'm interested in. If you have a bit more time later on, I'd like to sit down and talk with you and put a proposal to you.
Okay.
If you're interested." And I'm like, okay, I'm home in an hour. You can give me a call back. So an hour later, I got on the phone. I was chatting with him and he said his gallery, they got 3 galleries in very well-off areas and they got a pretty big clientele list. And he said, but one of the advantages of his galleries is when there's events, they get approached to put artwork on display that'll suit that event. And one of the events was the Formula One Grand Prix in Melbourne. And he goes, we have every year we get asked to display artwork at the time it was Bernie Eccleston's, I guess, where he would invite all these VIP clients and the drivers would have their driver's briefing in this boardroom area.
Oh, I see.
And their job was to put artwork on display that captured the Formula One or speed was the focus in the artwork that he was to put on display. It was to capture the feeling of racing and whatnot.
Yeah, fitting for Formula One. That's
right. So he had a lot of artists doing paintings and that for that display. And he goes, well, what we don't have is any sculpture. And he goes, I'd like you to send some images through of your work so I can look at it. And so I was doing go-karts and a lot of industrial machinery like trucks, tractors, excavators. I was doing a lot of motorbikes at the time. And he goes, have you ever done a Formula One car? And I said, no, but I'd love to. And he goes, look, I want you to build. He gave me a list of things to build. So he goes, pick your favourite Formula One car or driver and build that car.
Okay.
So at the time I'd been to the Formula One Grand Prix before and I watched Schumacher. So I built Michael Schumacher's Ferrari.
It's a good choice.
At the time. And then he goes, and I want you to build some older stuff. So he gave me a 1935 Bugatti Type 59, I think it was at the time, to build. And
okay, that's a sculptural in itself.
Yeah, he gave me that, and there's a Porsche 911. And then he said, I want you to do a couple other cars, which would not necessarily be race cars, but are in a higher end market. So he got me to build a Rolls Royce. A vintage Rolls Royce. And he said, the reason I'm getting you to choose these other vehicles is because if they don't sell at this Grand Prix, I have got clients with these vehicles,
wow.
so I can pitch it to them.
Jackpot.
Right. And he goes, and part of the incentive of you to go out of your way and build these pieces for me, because he goes, I'm not commissioning you to build it. You have to build these and I'll hopefully then sell it for you.
Got it. So it's a consignment deal, basically.
Right. But he goes, as a incentive, he goes, I'd love for you to have an exhibition at my gallery. So he goes, you do this, I will let you have a 2.5, 3 week exhibition.
Wow.
And I won't charge you for that, for the exhibition, but you do me a favor, I'll do you a favor. Like, I'll help promote your work and put it on display in my gallery. And I have got a pretty big clientele list. So I'd invite all them to the opening night and we'll see how we go. And I said, okay, it sounds like a good idea. So I went home and started building some stuff for some artwork for the Grand Prix. And I was studying at the time actually at uni. So I had to go home on weekends and used my dad's workshop to build these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up building these 4 cars, and he took it to the Grand Prix, and they were well received, but none of them actually sold. So he goes, "Don't worry about it. That's a good publicity for your up and coming exhibition. We can, use that to say, hey, this artist was the first sculptor we had display their work at the Formula One Grand Prix."
Got it.
And so he goes, any publicity is good publicity, and he goes, you never know what comes of it. So just put your work out there. If you don't mind, if you're willing to go out on a limb and build new things that you haven't done and try and draw clientele that way, as opposed to you just having clients come to you with requests, go out and do your own thing, things that you like and passionate about, and which I had done prior. Like I'd been building things that I'd like too, like certain cars and whatnot. So he come to me and said, look, you've got these 4 sculptures. How about we try and get about 12 to 15 sculptures to put on display? And I already had other artwork at home, which I used to display. But essentially I had an exhibition through him, and that's where I did the talkback radio for 5 minutes.
Okay.
So he got me in the local radio station to promote my up-and-coming exhibition. So I more or less got on there and just described my work a little bit and what I was doing and what my exhibition's about. So it was my first solo exhibition, but I had supporting artists who put their artwork on display just to help fill that area in the gallery. But, the opening night I had 15 pieces on display. The opening night I sold 8 of them.
Wow.
And I got 2 or 3 other commissions. And then by the end of the exhibition, I only had 1 sculpture left. Everything else sold.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty successful opening night / exhibition.
Yeah. So that was something new. And then from there, he saw my work, the potential in it.
Mm-hmm.
So he started giving me requests of things to build.
Okay.
It wasn't just...
So it was basically he was commissioning you at this point.
In a roundabout way. He would pitch to me things to build, which he thought there would be a market for it. So, and he would try and, I guess, events that were coming up or popular in Australia, he'd try and focus some artwork to go away from the automotive side. So, for example, the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, he got me to build a yacht.
Okay.
A couple of yachts to do. There was also... horse racing is very big in Australia, so he got me to build some horse sculptures in my style. Also, the Tour de France was on, and an Australian for the first time won the event, Cadel Evans.
Mm-hmm.
So he got me to build a cyclist, just things like that because that was, the talk at the time. So
it's almost commemorative.
Right. And he also just challenged me to build things in general. But then he'd have, with my work on display, he'd have clients come in and see their stuff and say, oh, look, I like his style, but could he build this? So he'd ring me and get me to build things. And it was successful. We had a little thing going, and then it all sort of took a nosedive. I guess I learnt a valuable lesson from a business point of view through him, which is why I more or less went out on my own and I refused to have a middleman.
Okay.
I just decided to deal directly with the client and there was no bullshit more or less involved. It was just,
Right.
this is the deal. The 50% deposit. I build it. Be happy with it. Done. And I just deal directly with that client.
Right.
Versus with him, he started taking advantage of me being naive, and I guess he saw that my work was selling so good that, he started bumping up the price but not giving me any cut.
Oh, I see.
Type thing. And I don't know. It was a good lesson. It was a good...
It's a real life lesson. It's a lesson that shows you what people are capable of, even when you think that they have your best interest.
It made me get smarter in my business sense and how I present myself and how my work is valued. In a gallery, it does seem a lot more valuable than if you just display it on your office shelf and you have someone come around to look at it on your shelf.
Sure.
So I started doing my own little exhibitions in and around Melbourne, and I would go to certain car shows, and I knew my target market or my audience, so I would focus my artwork on that, still building things I wanted to build to showcase my work, but I guess just chasing new challenges, new things to build. So I started, but I had an exhibition at this restaurant in Melbourne. There's a guy I actually started working with at GM. He opened up his own restaurant, and the theme of this restaurant was it was very industrial, but it was motorbikes. They had an actual workshop where they hand built custom motorcycles in the restaurant.
It's an interesting concept.
And it was all glass window fronts, so people in the restaurant could see all these motorbikes and stuff. But it was a very designer, artsy sort of a feel. So he had a lot of artwork on display, and he'd heard through friends of his about my artwork and wanted to see what I was doing. And he just said, look, your work would work well in our restaurant. If you want to come down and have a look, you can put your work on display, and then maybe we want to start in our workshop area that was quite big. He goes, we want to start doing little exhibitions or private events in that area.
Right.
Would you be interested in showing your work and inviting all these people along, and they would eat at our restaurant? That's their cut of it. But in return, that we'd have your work on display as a draw card, and, it's you scratch my back, I scratch yours.
It's a two-way street.
That's
right.
Absolutely. So, I got busy, and I set myself a goal. So I decided to have that exhibition in about 4 months' time. So it gave me enough time to put together some artwork and contact previous clients and borrow back my work and plan out my exhibition and then try and promote it. I had about 20 pieces on display.
And this is all while you're at university?
Yeah, studying and working.
So 3 days at a time that you're actually putting into working on these sculptures.
I didn't sleep much, put it that way.
Well, it doesn't sound like you sleep much now either, so.
No. I had actually, to utilise my time more, I actually rented out a little garage space or workshop space not far from where I was living in the city. So I didn't have to go all the way back to my parents' place, which was 2 hours away, to build things. So after university or working, we'd go in this little studio space or garage space, I guess, and weld away to all hours of the night.
I understand why your father wanted you to go to university, but it seems like you were having a lot of fun in doing this, and you were successful, and it was only kind of the start. Why not continue with doing this as a career?
The same reason why I don't do it now as a full-time job. The social aspect of it. I think the moment you start doing your hobby as a full-time job, it's no longer a hobby. So would the passion still be there? Would it die out? I guess once again, it was just that was always my backup. I always had that as I could fall back on and do. I guess for me, I didn't know how much work I could get out of it and how far I could push it. So I was always curious as to working in a design studio and seeing what it was to work on designing cars.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try that, whether it worked out or not. So I studied industrial design and majored in automotive transportation design, and then I actually ended up getting an internship at GM because I had a program going at the time, and you more or less went for an interview, you showed your folio, and you had to sell yourself to try and because all the kids going to university want this position.
Sure.
So how are you any better than them? So we interviewed for it, and they ended up giving me a position. They saw potential in what I was doing. So, and they could see by my artwork on the side that I had good drive and good work ethic. They offered me a position. I worked for a year with them. And then the end of the internship, they actually offered me another one to come back the second year. And I said, no, I want to finish my university degree. I went back to uni. And then the first week of me starting uni, I got a phone call from my previous manager, and he actually said, what if you came and worked for us as a contractor? Because we still want you to work for us, but not on a full-time sense. You can do it part-time while you're studying. But you have the option to do a full-time week. But so in other words, you're required to do X amount of hours.
Right.
But you can work up to 40 hours. So do a full week if you've got the time to do it.
Okay.
So, okay. So I did. I actually studied full-time and worked full-time, and then did my artwork on the side and still racing on weekends and trying to maintain some sort of social life as well. But I guess working in the automotive industry made me realise I enjoyed the social aspect of it. Working with other people and interacting with other people on a project, that made it somewhat fun. And I guess the reason, to answer your question as to why I'm not doing my artwork full-time, because I do have enough work to support myself full-time, is because of the social aspect. I'd be in a little box, a little workshop on my own, welding and grinding to all hours, and I'd be achieving things and I'd be doing something I'm passionate about, but would I get burnt out? Would I still enjoy it after a few years because I'm not interacting with people?
Right.
But the other upside to working in a design studio and doing what I'm doing, not only am I learning new skills, new processes, which I apply to my artwork, but it's also that creativity, working with other people and getting their feedback on my personal work. So they would see my artwork, and that's how it's progressed a lot in the last, I'm going to say, 7 years. If you see where it was 7 years ago to where it is now, it's chalk and cheese. It's definitely come a long way, and that's working with industry professionals, getting their professional critique on my work.
Jamie, it's been a pleasure. And I think the first thing that people should do after they listen to this episode is to go to your Instagram. So what's your Instagram?
Jamie Schena 59. And you want to know why the 5'9"?
What? Okay.
That's my old race number.
There you go.
So that's how
because you don't look like you're a guy that was born at 59. I can tell you.
No. That was my race number, and I had from start to finish in my race career. And yeah, I guess I've just kept it with me because that's, once again, part of how it all started. So
nice.
And plus Jamie Schena was taken. So.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Okay. The Road Stories podcast is recorded, mixed, and produced by Michael Senderovich. Original music is provided by Clarence in the Road Stories project. You can find more music by Clarence by going to soundcloud.com/Clarence Los Angeles. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review. It helps the show greatly. And lastly, please follow the show on social media at RS Podcast. Thanks so much for listening.